Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Vihari Madhava Kunda Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Vihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivraj Kachajasta Tarasati Shrimad. His Divine Grace of Bhāgavatam Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. ISKCON Founder Acharya His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki. Jayanitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivraj Kachajasta Tarasati Shrimad. His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Prabhupada Ki. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Brinda Ki, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki, Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Shri Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki, Shri Radha Govinda Gopinath, Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki, Shri Braja Bhumi Vrindavan Dham Ki, Shri Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki, Shri Jagannath Puri Chaitanya Dham Ki, Ganga Mai Ki, Jamuna Mai Ki, Bhakti Devi Ki, Srimati Tulsi Maharani Ki, Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda Ki, Gaur Premanandi. All glory to some of the devotees. All glory to some of the devotees. All glory to some of the devotees. All glory to Sri Guru, Sri Gauranga, and Srila Prabhupada. Continued reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Additional Pastimes. This is chapters still entitled A Visit to Boston. It came as a surprise to everyone when one day Prabhupada said that he would be giving some of his disciples Brahman or second initiation. He would award the Gayatri Mantra and sacred thread to those who had been initiated for at least 1 year. The devotees wanted to know more about the initiation, and Prabhupada said he would explain everything at the ceremony. The ceremony, he said, would be in the temple, and there should be a sacrificial fire, just as at any other initiation. He invited Mr. Matthews from Harvard as the guest of honor. When was this, Boston? 1968, because Montreal was right after. So that means probably that these devotees were initiated for almost 2 years, many of them, before even the very first Brahmin initiation in ISKCON. On the day of the initiation, everyone crowded into the temple room around the mound of earth where the sacred fire would soon be blazing. The half a dozen male disciples whom Srila Prabhupada had selected to receive Brahminical initiation took their seats. Prabhupada entered, taking his seat on the pillow on the floor directly before the mound of earth. He began to explain how his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, had introduced Brahminical initiation for disciples not born of Brahmin families. He said the Vedic scriptures offered much evidence that by associating with pure devotees, anyone could become a Brahmana. In fact, the scriptures said that if one born in a Brahmin family did not behave as a Brahmin, then he should not be accepted as a Brahmana. So it was in following his spiritual master and the Vedic scriptures that Srila Prabhupada was now going to give Brahminical initiation to his disciples. Addressing Mr. Matthews as Professor Matthews, Prabhupada asked whether he had any questions about the procedure. Mr. Matthews laughed and said he was not a professor yet. He asked whether the Gayatri Mantra was more important than the Hare Krishna Mantra. Prabhupada replied that the Hare Krishna Mantra was sufficient in itself for delivering the disciple back to Godhead. Nevertheless, the Gayatri Mantra would increase the Krishna consciousness of the disciple. Mr. Matthews, do these disciples take on any new vows, such as fasting? Prabhupada, no, there is no new vow. As far as fasting is concerned, people take to fasting because generally they eat all nonsense all week. Sounds like some people we know. So for one day they stop eating in order to purify themselves. But the devotees are always eating Krishna Prasadam, which is sanctified. So even by eating, they are fasting. Okay, you should remember that. Later in the ceremony, the boys went one by one and sat beside Srila Prabhupada, who placed a sacred thread, white thread, over their bare shoulders and chest and showed them how to count the mantras on their fingers. While the sacrificial fire was blazing and the devotees were chanting mantras and throwing grains into flames, the landlord's wife suddenly intruded. She was middle-aged, intoxicated, disheveled, a grotesque alcoholic, tottering in the doorway. Striding into the room, she shouted, "God damn this house!" and then turned and left, slamming the door. Prabhupada looked up innocently. What did she say? Did she say that this is the house of God? She's just drunk, Satsvarup said. Govinda Dasi hadn't gone to the initiation, excusing herself as ill. Although she hadn't told Prabhupada, she was upset that he wasn't giving Brahminical initiation to women. Disappointed, she had stayed at Swamiji's apartment crying. After an hour, however, she decided that by behaving so foolishly, she was missing out on Prabhupada's talk. So she hurried out of the house and ran all the way to the temple, arriving near the end of the ceremony. As she entered, Prabhupada looked up. "Oh," he said, "I was just thinking, where is that girl? And Krishna has sent." After the ceremony, Govinda Dasi conferred with Jadharani, who was also slighted. Prabhupada could detect their mentality, although they didn't openly voice their complaints. The next morning he told Gaurasundar and Govinda Dasi that he saw no harm in offering the Gayatri Mantra to women, but they could not receive the sacred thread. That very night he held a separate ceremony initiating Govinda Dasi and Jadharani into the Gayatri Mantra. A few days later, a group of devotees came from New York, and Prabhupada initiated more Brahmanas. One morning, when he saw a group of new Brahmin initiates coming to join him on the walk, he said, "Oh, here come the Brahmanas. But now don't be Brahmanas in name only." Srila Prabhupada ki. Don't be Brahmanas in name only. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Śrimad Bhāgavatam, 4th canto, 7th chapter, text number 28. Shri Śrimad Bhāgavatam Dev ki. We better get this one up on the screen. I'm going to need a little help with the meter on this one. Yeah, don't turn it too much. We need everybody to see. Okay, that's good. You got to make it big. Who's got that? There it goes. What do you think, Ram? Anyway, we'll just wing it. This chapter is titled, The Sacrifice Performed by Daksha. Sadasya Uchu. Sadasya Uchu. Utpat Yadvan Yasaran. Utpat Yadvan Yasarana Uruklesha Durgan Togogra. Utpat Yadvanya Sarana Uruklesh Durgan Tagogra. These are the compound words, are a little tricky. Basically, you have to carry the consonant over from one word to the other so that it becomes, where you have Durge, it's Durgan Takogra. Or where you have Advan Yasarana, because it Utpat Yadvan Yasarana. So that's all run together. Vyalan Viste Vishaya Mriga Trishat Mageharu Bharaha. Vyalan Viste Vishaya Mriga Trishat Mageharu Bharaha. Dvandva Sabre Kala Mriga Bhayeshok Davegya Sarta Vesabre Kalamrika Bhayeshok Davegya Sarta Padokaste Sharanada Kadayati Kamopashishtaha Padokaste Sharanada Kadayati. Okay, who's that brave soul that's going to... Ram, you should try. Sadashuchu. Utpat Yadvanya Sharana Ukleshta Durgan Tagogra. Vyalan Viste Vishaya Mrga Trishat Shatmakehuruparaha Dvandva Sabre Kalamrga Bhaye Shokdave Gisata Padokate Shanada Kadayati Kamo Pashrishtaha Utpat Yavanya Sharana Urukrishta Durgan Tagogra Vyalan Vishte Vishemaka Chishat Magero Paraha Dvandva Shabre Kalamrga Bhaye Shokdave Grasata Padokate Shanada Kadayati Kamo Pashrishta. I'll just go to the ladies. Ladies. Utpat Yadvanya Sharana Urukrishta Durgan Tagogra Vyalan Viste Vishemaka Chishat Magehuru Paraha Dvandva Sabre Kalamaga Bhaye Shokdave Gyasata Padokiste Shanada Kadayati Kamo Pashrishtaha Sadatsya. The members of the assembly Uchu said Utpati, repeated birth and death, Advani, on the path of Asharane, not having a place to take shelter, Uru, great, Klesha, troublesome, Durge, in the formidable fort, Antika, termination, Ugra, ferocious, Vyala, snakes, and Vishte, being infested with, Vishaya, material happiness, Mrigatrishi, mirage, Atma, body, Geha, home, Uru, heavy, Bara, burden, Dvandva, dual, Swabre, poles, ditches of so-called happiness and distress. Kala, ferocious, Mriga, animals, Baye, being afraid of, Shokadave, the forest fire of lamentation, Agyasa Arta, for the interest of the rascals, Pada Oka, shelter of your lotus feet, Te, unto you, Sharanada, giving shelter, Kada, when, Yati, went, Kama Upashrishta, being afflicted by all sorts of desires. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The members of the assembly addressed the Lord. 827, huh? There we go. O exclusive shelter, For all who are situated in troubled life, in this formidable fort of conditional existence, the time element, like a snake, is always looking for an opportunity to strike. This world is full of ditches of so-called distress and happiness, and there are many ferocious animals always ready to attack. The fire of lamentation is always blazing, and the mirage of false happiness is always alluring, but one has no shelter from them. Thus, foolish persons live in a cycle of birth and death, always overburdened in discharging their so-called duties, and we do not know when they will accept the shelter of your lotus feet. Purport. We'll skip the common reading. Persons who are not in Krishna consciousness are living a very precarious life, as described in this verse. But all these circumstantial conditions are due to forgetfulness of Krishna. The Krishna conscious movement is meant to give relief to all these bewildered and distressed persons. Therefore, it is the greatest relief work for all human society. And the workers thereof are the greatest well-wishers, for they follow in the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya, who is the greatest friend to all living entities. Om Jnana Tvandasya Gyananjana Shlakaya Chakso Anandatam Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Padam Langade Yat Kripatam Aham Vande Shri Gurum Tirataranam Namo Mahavarinyaya Krishna Premapadayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gurdashe Namaha Namo Bhavanidavaya Go Brahman Hitaya Cha Jagadataya Krishna Govindaya Namo Namaha. Did you do a sound check, Michael? Make sure it's broadcasting. Two interesting opportunities. One is that how nice it was to read about that first Brahmin initiation. Historically speaking, we're able to follow along and see how Srila Prabhupada was guiding the new devotees and observing them. So this system is still in practice, that the devotees should be initiated for at least a year. He should have been following strictly for at least a year, not just initiated for a year. Someone could be initiated and not following, or not being strict. But here Prabhupada indicated that following. So following doesn't mean just that I'm checking off a box in an attendance sheet, but that one is actually executing the duties assigned by the spiritual master, following the 4 regulative principles, chanting 16 rounds, and engaging in devotional service. These things are not optional. Otherwise, this process simply becomes a rubber stamp. Nowadays, rubber stamps are not very well known. Everyone have some experience of a rubber stamp? Yeah, you have experience? You've seen them sometimes. They have an ink pad and they have a stamp. Void right across the top of the check. Means that check is no longer valid. It could have been written for $1 million. Once that rubber stamp is there, that check is worthless. And so rubber stamps have different purposes. But the main purpose in our respect is that one should not become a show bottle Brahmin. So there's another, and not an anachronism, but it's a throwback to the time when you could walk past an apothecary shop. Does anyone know what an apothecary shop is? A drugstore. And in the drugstores of days gone by, they would have bottles stacked up in the window, different labels on them. But those bottles were either filled with water or empty. And so they were called show bottles. Even though it said whatever medicine was in there, it was just for display purposes. So one should not become a rubber-stamped devotee or a show bottle brahmana. That you're just wearing this Brahmin thread, but you don't know what to do with it, you don't know how to use it, you don't know the purport, and you don't take it seriously. So show bottle means no effect. Because if you take one of those show bottles, because it's just water and you drink it, then there's no potency. So in order to be effective, one has to be acting in the capacity as the spiritual master intended, performing the duties of a brahmana, and executing the orders faithfully, effectively. And this way we perpetuate the parampara. So this is also our duty, where a Brahmin is supposed to be one who teaches by example. That's the acharya, but every person has the potential. Just like when we joined, no one was thinking that, well, in the future I'll become some initiating guru. No, there was not even a hint of that. But yet we see nowadays that many devotees have taken up this task on behalf of the spiritual master to perpetuate the lineage. Just like a dutiful son, he carries out the business of the father even after the father is departed. Along with the reputation and the quality. Just imagine if that son took that business and ran it into the ground. Didn't uphold the purity or the quality of the previous product. And no one would want it. Everyone would condemn it. So it's a great responsibility. And if one takes that responsibility, he must act very faithfully, with full faith, full determination, conviction, without any interruption by Maya. So this is something that, like I said, in the beginning, no one was thinking, well, I may have to take that position. As a matter of fact, none of us even contemplated what happens when Srila Prabhupada leaves. It wasn't. For all the years that we were there, it never even crossed our mind. Crossed Prabhupada's mind. Many times he would say, I'm an old man, I can die at any time. But we didn't think what was the purport? What does that mean? And he was preparing us even without us understanding how. By always being there, giving the example, showing how to conduct the affairs of the society, not to think that they're just some trivial material, what's that other word? Rigmarole. It's another word not used very much. Rigmarole. Routine activity that don't have much make much sense. So, just by being in Prabhupada's presence, there was always continuing education. It's like now people have to go, once you're licensed, if you're a nurse or you're a private investigator or whatever, every time you go to renew your license, you have to present a certain amount of continuing education credits in order to renew. You can't have just been idle for that gap of time. You have to show, no, I'm keeping up with whatever new advances there are in my respective profession. So this continuing education is also there in Krishna consciousness. If one is not executing his duties faithfully and following strictly, then he won't be making advancement. And he may not even realize it, but others can. Of course, one can do a self-assessment. And Prabhupada said the most, for us, becoming detached from attraction to the senses, especially sex life, this is the primary test of your advancement in spiritual life. It's not how many shlokas you memorized or how much austerity you performed. One has to be so convinced, he has to be detached. Vidya, Vairagya, Nija Bhakti Yoga. Vidya, Vairagya. Vairagya means renunciation. So knowledge, renunciation. These two things have to be there. You can have all the knowledge in the world, but if there's no vairagya, then there's no bhakti yoga. So these formulas are all there. Just like when you put a formula, everyone who's here who's been to college, the professor goes, it's like Mr. Matthews said, I'm not a professor yet. You go to the board and you write out the formula. And maybe you leave out one of the variables and you ask the students to fill it in. Right? So everything is there, but if somebody makes a mistake, then that formula is useless. You know, it could take up the whole chalkboard. But if you missed one integer, or one bracket, or one whatever you want to, then everything else that follows it was wrong. Everything else that follows it was wrong. So this science of self-realization is building on your everyday experience in Krishna consciousness. And so the more you serve, the better chance you have of developing the realization that will keep you in Krishna consciousness. And to that extent that you avoid actual practical devotional service, it's not that reading is not practical or other things are not practical. No, it's all practical. But it's just like, what do they call? Applied science. Right? You have science and then you have applied science. If you're not using what you've learned, then there's no realization. Again, jnana vairagya. And that's there also, especially since we're reading about this Brahman initiation. Prabhupada quotes in many places, Satyam, Samo, Damo, Tapasocham. Now, Satyam is not in that shloka. Samo, Damo, Tapasocham, Sante, Ajvamevacha, Jnanam, Vijnanam, Sayitam, Brahma Karma Sabhavajam. But truthfulness is the prime quality of a Brahmana. And so Prabhupada would always put that in the front of that verse. Satyam Samo Damo Tapasocham. Just for emphasis. But Jnana Vairagya, so this, to understand that distinction, Jnana means knowledge, Vairagya means realized knowledge. You can study all the books, so many books are there. But if you don't come to the conclusion and you don't practice, and you don't understand that my service is in direct proportion to my realization, that because I understand the philosophy, I can do anything in Krishna consciousness. There's no hesitation. There's in my father's generation, they had a saying, and maybe you've heard it, said, he who hesitates is lost. He who hesitates is lost. This is a generation of people who did things. They built things, huge cities, went to war, fought battles. And they understood what it means to engage. Even I remember Radhanath Maharaj also commented one time, he said, fortune favors the bold. And a lot of his disciples understand that, why it's emphasized. You have to be bold in Krishna consciousness, not timid. But that boldness doesn't mean that I just shoot for the rhinoceros. No, it means I see every little detail. And I don't ignore everything. And I try to understand how things can be better served for Krishna's pleasure. Whether it's dressing the deities and trying to make everything beautiful, symmetrical, and harmonious, you know, and also to see how the temples cleansed. Shri Vigrahara Dhananityanana, Sringara Tan Mandira Marjanada. So it's not just Shringar, which is we have Shringar Arti. 7:30 Arti is called Shringar Arti. Sringara Tan Mandira Marjanada. In the same line, in the same shloka, That the dressing of the deity and the cleansing of the temple is non-different. And if you're just dressing the deity nicely and you're not cleansing the temple, then your realization is defective. Defective. So we have to practice what we read, practice what we preach. Everything has to be on the level of realization. Purposeful action. And just like Daksha, it's amazing how nicely Daksha is speaking now after he's received his new situation. He's become chastened. Sometimes that is required for us to get to the next level. We have to be humbled. You know, just like this word klesha. Adhyatmik, adhibautik, adhidaivika klesha. These are the miseries rising from one's body, one's mind, others' body and minds, one's own mind, the demigods. Yeah? All these things are there. But this, we have an opportunity to see them. This is part of our advancement, our advancing in Krishna consciousness, that we get like a few seconds premonition or a few minutes, even a little longer, to see that, I need to step aside. I need to bob and weave. You know, Maya's heading right at me. I don't stand there and let her land a blow squarely on my jaw. No. You avoid it. Only a foolish person stands there and takes a beating. An intelligent person knows what to do. He knows how to avoid it. Or he knows how to fight back. So Krishna consciousness, you're being prepared with advanced knowledge. Other people don't have this. They don't know what Maya is. But we can see it coming a mile away if you're, to the extent that you're chanting nicely and sincerely. You see that, my mind is setting me up. By some meditation. Sometimes it's setting me up by, pulling me down what they call the rabbit hole. Why do they call it a rabbit hole? It comes from Alice in Wonderland. Where you go into an area which is deep in the subconscious or the conscious, where there's all types of mysteries and conspiracies. But it goes deeper and deeper. So this is the point. So we have to avoid such situations where you get pulled in and then bewildered. So we have but like I said, the devotees have, what is that called? Forewarned is forearmed. It doesn't mean forearms, doesn't mean chaturabhuj. But forewarned means I've got advance notice. So somebody tells you, hey, tomorrow there's going to be a big situation here, you should avoid this area. That's forewarned. You don't think, okay, no, forget it, I'm not going to listen to you, I'm just going to go down there and take my chances. No, only a less intelligent person is going to risk life and limb when something credible is presented to you. No, you avoid it. But it's not. We have to, and by listening to this voice of reason that we're developing through our practice of Krishna consciousness, by our intelligence is becoming purified, because this is the key. Everything's becoming purified. So as your intelligence is purified, to that extent you get greater and greater, we call it insight, but it's really not insight, it's just, people call it insight because they don't realize that higher intelligence leads to an ability to perceive things in their proper perspective. And so you take it all together. The one famous, whatever you want to call it, there was various people who wrote books on the art of war. And so there is a term for those who are successful, like Napoleon, or like Patton, or even Ramal, or these great leaders in contemporary or past history, they had something that they called coup d'oeil. Means they could see things broadly and immediately understand what to do. Immediately understand what to do. And so those are the persons who win battles and win wars. Otherwise, why is one person successful? Why is one general successful as opposed to others? He didn't have that particular quality. Couldn't process it quick enough. He couldn't see everything and then come to that decision. So we're developing that. Devotees are very famous for that, especially Prabhupada. Look what he was able to do. He could see everything simultaneously and know that what had to happen. 1968, he's making Brahmanas. 1 year later, there were so many Brahmins, and what did he do? He sent them all over the world. Sent them to London. They made huge, look what they did. They influenced the Beatles. They made so much inroads and developed got a beautiful temple donated, Bhaktivedanta Manor. Established in the middle of the heart of London, the temple at Bury Place, and then later on at Soho. These things are not possible for ordinary people. That's why in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Lord Chaitanya declares that I am sending my Senapati Bhakt, my commander-in-chief. Not just any person, not just some lieutenant or some sergeant. No, I'm sending my commander-in-chief. And what does the commander-in-chief? He conquers everything. So this was something that we probably won't see again in our lifetime or in many lifetimes. This is a seminal event. Just like in the Christian tradition, 2,000 years ago, Jesus Christ appeared. And people became influenced. Why? Because he was an empowered person. Prabhupada said, Shaktivesh avatar. So what to speak? And we can understand. Now we don't want to make declarations because Prabhupada refrained from that. That's like Mahaprabhu would also. He showed someone would declare that he's this or that, he would cover his ears. Because a Vaishnava never wants to hear something like that. That you're empowered or you're this or you're that. No. Das, das, anudas. I'm simply the servant of the servant of the servant. Gopi Bhartu Padakamaliyor. Das, das, anudas. We can understand from the result, right? Palam parachiyate. You judge something by the result. Palam parachiyate means you judge a tree by its fruit. A good tree does not give bad fruit. Palam means fruit. Palam parachiyate. So we see that in this line, and it looks like Srila Prabhupada was saying that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was the first since in generations to award Brahmin thread to non-Brahmanas. There's a huge controversy, scandalous at that time in caste-conscious India. Taking birth in a Brahmin family was a big thing. It opened many doors. Even without any qualification, you got benefit. But what was that benefit? It was all misconception, speculation. But it took Prabhupada to show, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, what it really means. What is that? Atak pumbir dvija shesta varnashama vibhagasaha svanustatasya dharmasya sangsiddhir haritoshanam. Atak pumbir dvija shesta. Dvija shesta means this is what a Brahmin. Dvija means Brahmin. Varnashama vibhagasaha. It doesn't matter what caste, what birth, what ashram. If you do not, Samsiddhya Haritoshanam. If you do not please the Lord Hari, Toshana means to satisfy. Samsiddhya, then there's no perfection. So it doesn't matter what you call yourself. Remember, rubber stamp. Simply rubber stamp and show bottle. So therefore, for thousands of years, Brahminical culture languished. Just ritualistic traditions meant to perpetuate this artificial caste system. And even it's right there in the Bhagavad Gita, and still nobody took it seriously. Chartavana Maya Shishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasaha. There's 4 varnas and ashrams because says, I'm creating these. Guna Karma Vibhagasaha, according to work and quality, not birth. No janma. Guna Karma Vibhagasaha. But they very, how can you say, suspiciously ignore that verse because it cuts down their caste system, which they used to exploit others for thousands of years. So we're very fortunate to have this opportunity to see Prabhupada in action within our lifetime, even if you weren't directly exposed. You're directly exposed by Prabhupada's teachings and by his followers. Isn't there that verse? He lives forever by his divine instructions, and his sincere follower lives with him. So this is not a sentiment. And it's been proven now over the last 50 some odd years, right? Or not quite, let's see, Prabhupada left in 77, so 48 years. But yes, it's proven that it's a living philosophy. It's not a dead philosophy. A lot of these so-called religious institutions are just no life. No life. Even so-called temples in other places, no life, no bhakti. When people come to this temple, they're immediately impressed. They can feel it. They see how nicely the deities are taken care of. They taste the prasadam. All right? The test is in the tasting. The test is in the seeing. The test is everything that you come into contact with that has been done with devotion. And then everyone can see it. And so this is our endeavor. So therefore we have this open house on Sundays. Why? It's like a demonstration of our bhakti. We want to show people that, yes, we want them to see the difference. Otherwise, what's the difference between these people? Just the dress? They wear their hair differently. They put their makeup on differently. What's the difference? The difference is action in Krishna consciousness converts the mundane to the transcendental. And everything is just an assistant in this regard. It's like if you're a carpenter, you have so many tools. They assist you in your tribe. Without those tools, it's very difficult to execute your profession. But it's not that these tools are all in all. You can always change them. But yes, nimitta matram bhava savyasachan. Our ultimate interest is to become a tool for Krishna. And we have everything self-contained in that respect. Just like you're all in one tool, right? Everyone's seen the when you do certain work, you have an all-in-one tool. They issue them in the military, very handy to have. You can't carry a whole toolbox, but you can carry a toolbox in a compact, multi-purpose tool that can do many things. Can't do everything, but it can do many things. And so we want to be Krishna's multi-purpose tool. Not just that I'm only a screwdriver or I'm only a hammer. No, whatever Krishna wants. Nimitta matram bhava savi. I am simply the instrument. You use me as you like. Not that, somebody comes and says, boy, I need somebody to wash pot. No, I can't do that. How many times have you heard that? How many times have you said that? Don't be that person. You have to take everything as an opportunity given by Krishna. If you see it that way, what is the loss? Neha bikramanasasti prativayana vidyate swapamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahatobhyat. There's no loss or diminution, and a little advancement saves one from the greatest fear. So the only way to become fearless is to make that endeavor, and to go outside your comfort zone. Otherwise, there's no challenge. Krishna, there's no advancement. The realization becomes, how can you say, few and far between. And then what happens, the person says, this lifestyle, maybe it's not for me. I'm not so sure. Lack of conviction. Remember, vidya vairagya, nija bhakti yoga. So this conviction doesn't come by licking the outside of the bottle. You have to open the bottle and you have to taste it. And the taste of Krishna consciousness is how much you can engage all your senses. Rishikesha Rishikena Sevana Bhakti Uchite. Why the Goswamis emphasize these shlokas? Why did they write like that? Why didn't they just say, no, go to Vrindavan, just imitate the pastimes of the eternal associates of Krishna? No, he didn't say that. Would have been easy, right? Just pretend. But this pretend, of course, Krishna tells Arjuna very carefully. He says, don't be a pretender. Because he knew that in the future people would try to imitate or try to get something superficial from this discourse. And so therefore we have everything we need in order to properly execute our duties in Krishna consciousness. But it is up to us to recognize what is beneficial and what is not. Every service has a benefit. Some service has more benefit. Prabhupada also said, if you love me, distribute my books. Very powerful service. So there's some hint that you can accelerate. All right? You get a lot of advancement doing what you don't want to do, to humble yourself, to approach others in spite of being rejected on a regular, consistent basis. Really works on that false ego. To get, after 8 hours standing at the street light, not having sold a single BTG or stick of incense, you really wonder, what's going on? Maybe my false ego got in the way. Maybe I wasn't trying to, because Krishna said, not Krishna said, but obviously Krishna says, Yayata Mam, as you surrender unto me, I reward you accordingly. But Prabhupada also indicated, and I was just reading, but I forget which chapter it was, that if you approach someone for a donation, the super soul and that person taught if you're sincere in your endeavor, Krishna will reciprocate. He'll tell that person, yes, give $1,000, million, $2 million. But there has to be a certain level of purity. Purity is the force. So we're going to, 9 o'clock, we got a lot to do today. Get some questions. We have a question from the ladies' side first. But you have to say it a little loud. I don't think there's a mic. Is there a mic, guys, connected to this? Michael, did you connect a mic? The mic is for the benefit of those online. If there's nothing hooked up, you can take this mic and then just bring it back. Yeah, don't worry about it.
Hare Krishna. I have a couple of comments on some of the things that you've talked about. The first one is you spoke about in Prabhupada Lilamrita, Vaishnavis taking Brahmin initiation. I think Prabhupada set such a good example of, seeing beyond the body and giving Vaishnavis the opportunity to serve in that way. And we can see so many wonderful Vaishnavis who have become such amazing brahmanas, pujaris, and we've learned so much from them. Another thing that I wanted to comment on was, I'm taking a course right now where they spoke yesterday about devotion, and the only way to develop devotion is by humility. The more humble we are, the more devotion we have. And then the last thing were 3 points that you spoke on were to be a brahmana, we have to be the example, we have to be truthful, that's the first thing that is said, and not to be a show bottle. And I have a little story that I remember from several years ago when I was living in another temple, about someone who was in a leadership position, and they showed all these qualities. There was a situation that arose, and one morning in Mangalarti, they made an announcement. They said, I had made a mistake, and I acknowledge this, and kind of corrected their mistake. So in front of the congregation, in front of the other devotees, and by this, I'd always stuck in my mind, years later, that this person who was in this position of, just having a little bit more power, more say, and they set the example. They showed by the example. They weren't just a show bottle, They were showing others that this is what to do, And they were also truthful in that, and always made an imprint on me that this is the way we should be. This is how we should be. We should all be. And of course, everyone has anarthas, and we're all trying to overcome these anarthas. But I always it's stuck in my mind that this is such a good example. And this was someone who showed that.
Bhagavad Gita also says, Api chet sudaracharo, bhajate mamananibha. Says that, and we hear this a lot of time, to err is human, to forgive is divine. But this divinity is not some external force, it's internal. That when one commits a mistake, if he rectifies himself, or if he's rectified by others, then he recognizes that, okay, this was a chance or an opportunity to realize my limitations, right? The idea that one should not play with fire or you'll get burned. Right? So apichetsurachal means doesn't, you're forgiven. It says if you come back to the path, in other words, you renew your vow, just like Daksha. You know, he obviously strayed. He was punished, and then he rectified himself. Wasn't that he became left in frustration or embarrassment or humiliation? No, he accepted, what did they say? He faced the music, took it like a man. And he continued. So, if one has that capacity to learn from his mistakes, then Krishna will also keep you on the path. No loss or diminution. All right, so this is the key, no loss. So we have an opportunity, because we don't want to necessarily commit these mistakes, because they can lead to a permanent setback in this lifetime. We've seen it happen. And the way one avoids these mistakes is by maintaining close association. Because your God brothers will kindly remind you, and your God sisters, that, Prabhu, this is not a good thing. Not a good look. Not a good, mental space. Maybe you need to kind of like get some purification in the form of washing the pots. It's interesting to note that in the early days, when there was some need for, how can you say, instruction or some learnings in the form of not punishment, but some people thought of it in that way, that you would be given what? Devotional service. But devotional service in the form of doing something menial. Because there's no loss, it's all purifying. But if I'm not in the right mindset to worship the deity, then washing the pots will give me the most benefit, the most rectification, the quickest result to rectify that offense. And so it was used even for sometimes the most egregious offense. We saw that, and this is not, it could not be a permanent, there's a difference. We'll make it quick. It's like in the morning we chant the 10 offenses. Last stream devotees who've dedicated their lives to propagating the holy name, like on and on like this. But a lot of these offenses are notable because they're due to a weakness of the heart. We don't see it so clearly like that. We normally see a weakness of heart manifesting in something like a fall down with the opposite sex. All right? Called a weakness of heart. And Prabhupada was very careful about how to rectify such fall downs. And this is where one's performing menial service, giving the opportunity of contemplation and rectification, all rolled into one. Even big devotees sometimes have to undergo this rectification. It's so powerful. Devotional service is so powerful. Right? So we have to, this Chaita Dharpana Margin, we sometimes don't realize it's just not just chanting the holy names is there, but everything associated with devotional service. Nama Chintamani Krishna Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha. Nama Shuddha Purna Mukta Binatvam Nama Namino. This indicates that Nama Chintamani Krishna, Krishna's name is Chintamani. It's the touchstone. It's everything. Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha. Chaitanya means the mortal life force. And that's Vigraha, means the form of. Purna Shuddha Nitya Mukta. It gives complete liberation. But it's not just Krishna's name. It's all of his, everything connected with Krishna and his name. Including his paraphernalia, including his service. So when one realizes that, from that platform it's very difficult to refuse to do some service. Because he has a higher understanding and appreciation and realization that I'm actually refusing Krishna. I'm not refusing the temple commander. He's just an agent. You know. But if I have to make 10 calculations in order to say yes, then my level of realization, my conviction, my faith is all slightly compromised. Right? Any opportunity to engage in devotional service is authorized from the highest level. Otherwise, what is the meaning? Where does it come from? How does devotional service have its potency at all if it's not coming from Krishna and his authorized agents? You know, sometimes we can refuse something. That's like in India, you have something called duplicate. Something which looks exactly the same, but it's not the same. You know, they called it a duplicate, imitation. And so in Krishna's temple, there's no duplicate, there's no imitation. Everything is 100% potent, 100% pure. There's no such thing as this devotional service is not as efficient, effective, or liberating as this service. No, nothing. Only difference is in our consciousness. So the more we practice eliminating this distinction, the quicker we advance in spiritual life. So that's firm faith and conviction. Utsaha nishtaya dharya tat tat karma pravartanat. Enthusiasm, faith, patience, firm conviction. Nishya means faith. So enthusiasm, faith. Utsaha nishtaya dharya. Patience, and then firm convictions. All these things together in a row. If one is not thinking, let me get up for Mangalarti, let me not entertain my mind, he has to have that enthusiasm. Enthusiasm doesn't mean madly jumping like just for show. Enthusiasm is the ability to motivate oneself. That's enthusiasm. Doesn't have to manifest externally like I said, like jumping up and down. But the ability to motivate oneself, that's enthusiasm. And that's a very prized qualification. You see, when people are going for a job, they want to see, is this person, what do they call them? Self-starter. If a person is a self-starter, he's going to be successful in whatever he does. Doesn't need somebody else telling him what to do. He doesn't need some external impetus. It's internal. He knows what to do, and he does it. That's enthusiasm. And then everything else, firm faith, all these things come, they're linked. Once you recognize that, how one thing is linked to another, then you can, how can you say, utilize them to your best capacity. And you see how these things, anyway, all you advanced devotees, I'm sure you get the idea. We can just go put everything into practice now. Right, Dhanukari? Yes. And you had a question? Huh? Commenting. You want to comment? You have to give Prue the mic. accepted.
That's interesting. You mentioned several times one of the nectarian type of devotional service as washing pads in the kitchen. And it reminds me there are around 12 types of Vaishnava Aparadha. And one of them is, it's not only like to communicate with devotees in very rude way, but even if you think that, for example, Pujari Seva is more important and benefit than that cleaning of the temple, it's also one of the type of Vaishnava Aparadha, actually. Yeah. And the question is, do you remember that story, Prabhu, about the Brahminic female initiations from Prabhupada with Govinda Devi Dasi? Do you remember that story with Prabhupada about his decision for the female second initiation with Govinda Devi Dasi? It was something like Prabhupada wanted to follow the strict rules, right? But maybe.
And also the mantra. Satru Maharaj enumerated, he explains that the mantra helps one, because that was the question that Professor Matthews asked. Said, what's the difference? Said that this Gayatri mantra assists one in making advancement. All right? So the Maha Mantra is the Yuga Dharma, and Chaita Darpana Marjanam Bhava Mahadavadya Nirvasman. We know all these verses. Nam Namakari Bahada Nija Sarva Shaktis. Krishna's name is all potent. Sarva Shakti. And so he's giving these names. So the Gayatri Mantra is also, it focuses because one's, depending on his opportunity for service and how he engages, this meditation is the next level of realizing one's eternal relationship with Krishna. It cannot be realized unless the heart is clean. So first is Chaita Darpana Marjanam. First the heart must be cleansed. And therefore Gayatri Mantra, Brahminical initiation, at least in ISKCON, has to take place 1 year later. After he has completed his Bhakti Shastri. After he has read because we have Bhakti Shastri, we have Bhakti by Bhav, all these different levels. One has to have a firm foundation in the philosophy. Not that it's, again, like a rubber stamp. Prabhupada used to say, 2 paise Brahman. Because back in the old days, a Brahman thread cost 2 paisa. 2 paisa is nothing. 1 paisa is 1/100th of a rupee. And a rupee nowadays is also nothing. But a paisa is less than nothing. And a Brahman thread costs 2 paisa. So anybody could buy a Brahman thread for 2 paisa